Hey, how's it going? Today I bring you how to magnetize the Stormtalon in Stormhawk. It is a very complicated magnetization due to the necessary modifications, many dry fits, tools, and materials. Let's start with the cockpits. Originally, they had a more square shape. According to the instructions, it should be glued to the base and inserted from below. This makes it impossible to exchange them because they are wider at the bottom and get caught by the chassis. The solution I found was to cut and rebuild the sides with 1 mm thick plastic card, gluing them to the structure along with the bottom and rear part of the Stormtalon cockpit, in addition to removing the front details so that the Stormhawk cockpit can be placed on top with many test fits. Don't worry, because this will not be seen in the final result. If you do it right, you get an almost perfect union. If there's a very large gap, it can be filled with epoxy putty, and once trimmed and sanded, it will be perfect. My first idea was to leave the pilot fix inside the cockpit, but he doesn't fit inside the Stormhawk cockpit, so the torso and arms are fixed to the Stormtalon cockpit. The cockpits are held in place with 5 by 1 mm magnets to the chassis. We move on to the wings. 10 by 1.5 mm magnets are used on them, which I recommend placing before assembling the chassis to have access from the inside to be able to reinforce them with epoxy putty. The magnet is indented inwards 1.5 mm, so the wing magnet enters inside the chassis, creating a mechanical and magnetic union. The hole needs to be enlarged enough for the magnet to fit in. I recommend using a power tool with a carving bit with many dry fits or a step drill bit. With this, we create a very strong union without wobbling. With the Stormtalon wings, it is much simpler because you only have to remove the original tongue and groove and replace it with the magnet. As an extra feature, we have the ability to position the wings as we want. Luckily, the two types of wings do not share parts. We move on to the weapon pods. The pods have 3 magnets. We can use the Skyhammer missile launcher holes as a guide to position the 3 by 2 mm magnets. On the side, I have placed another 3 by 2 magnet because the Lost Cannon have a power pack in their Stormtalon configuration. The trick to making this magnet invisible in the other configurations is to indent it slightly inward, cover it with super glue, and then sand it with 1000 grit, so that once painted you can't tell there's a magnet. At the rear, there are 2 options: exhaust grids for missiles or the receiver for Lost Cannon and heavy bolter. But as it is a minor detail, and I do not want the heavy bolter, I have glued the exhaust grids without further ado. But if you want both options, it would be very easy to magnetize them. At the material recount at the end of the video, I will count this part as magnetized with 3 by 2 magnets. To hold the pod to the chassis, I use 5 by 1 magnets with a little epoxy putty to make them flush. so that when we put it in its front position, it enters inside the chassis, creating another mechanical and magnetic union. Thus, it will be positioned perfectly. Thanks to the magnet being flush, when using the pods in their rear position, they have a proper grip. If the side magnet is not perfectly hidden, it would only be noticeable in the front missile configurations. But with a method of covering it with superglue, it is very easy to hide. For the Stormhawk setup, you need these little bits which are held in place with another 5x1 magnet placed on the bottom. We move on to the engines. They go like this, and thank you for watching. JK. The simplest and most straightforward method is to place 4x1mm magnets on each socket and motor. For the Stormhawk motors, a single 4x1mm magnet in the rear socket is sufficient. With a little epoxy putty, it can be placed in the correct position pretty easy. We move on to the nose weapons. Here we need to make a small compromise, and it is that these two skis are also used elsewhere, but I like the exposed motor better, and so I don't need to put so many magnets for minor details. With a 5x1mm magnets, you can attach all nose guns. It also allows you to position it as you like. With the nose lost cannon, you need a little epoxy putty to place the magnet at the necessary depth. And that's it. As an example, I will build the Stormhawk with lost cannon and Skyhammer missile launcher. That's all for today. As always, I leave a list of the necessary materials at the end of the video. Thanks for watching.